On this episode of The Cold Front, we look back at this past January when not one, but two blizzards occurred across the nation.
That's right, Rachel. Plus, it's February, and we're all wondering if that famed groundhog saw his shadow or not. But we will tell you how much you should believe. We're changing the way you see weather. This is The Cold Front on VUTV. Welcome to this episode of The Cold Front. I'm Lynnette Grant.
And I'm Rachel Duensing, and this is my last semester with The Cold Front.
Please don't say that.
I am a senior. I'm getting ready to graduate, but it's going to be a great last semester for me, and you're going to carry it on next year, and it's going to be awesome. But we're definitely back to have a great year, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
It is, but I'm not looking forward to when you leave. I feel ready, but I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to miss this place a little bit. I'm going to miss doing the Cold Front. But until then, we're not going to think about it until that comes in May. And
that's a good idea.
We're just going to have fun, and we're going to talk about some blizzards. So
let's talk about some blizzards.
I agree. Let's do it. So 2015 started off with a bang, and not only with New Year's Day, but also a major blizzard across the Northeast that arrived near the end of January. This major winter storm lasted a few days, but the damage and the amount of havoc it caused was vast. Major cities across the East Coast were affected by this storm. Much of New England was under a blizzard warning, winter storm warning, or winter weather advisory of some kind.
In addition to all that snowfall, the winds made everything worse. The extremely strong tropical force storm winds made drifts and snow pile everywhere. In areas along the coast, waves crashed and caused damage to buildings and homes. Other buildings saw water freeze on them, causing even more damage.
New York was definitely trying to prepare for this, and so they were causing evacuations, no travel advisories. It was definitely a mess.
I agree that they did a good thing trying to prepare ahead of time for that blizzard.
Yeah, definitely. They were trying to prepare for it, and when the storm was all said and done, many areas saw extreme amounts of snowfall. As we discussed before, the city of New York was prepared for the worst, but they ended up not receiving as much snow as forecast. It was areas of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maine that saw the heaviest amounts of snow. Lunenburg, Massachusetts saw 3 feet of snow. Boston received an exceptional amount of snow at 24.4 inches, while New York City Central Park had just below 10 inches. However, snowfall amounts accumulated up to 30 inches in parts of Long Island.
Now, the reason this snowstorm lasted such a long time was because it continued to ride up the coast. On Tuesday, January 27th, the center of the low-pressure system was located off the Atlantic coast southeast of Boston. By the evening hours, the storm moved to the east of Boston, but the moisture continued to wrap around the system and affect Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. Maine got the brunt of the storm on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So, Rachel, again, the reason why this storm lasted such a long time was that over the 2 or 3 days that the storm lasted, it just continued to ride along the coast, drawing in that moisture.
Yeah. And when we talk about major snowstorms, whether it's here at home or especially along the East Coast, that moisture is definitely a huge factor, especially when it comes to that really sort of wet, heavy snow that usually causes all of those travel problems. You really need a lot of moisture for that. And riding up along the coast near the Atlantic Ocean, they definitely had that big source of moisture, and it just kept falling as it rode up along the coast.
Definitely. And seeing accounts of what people went through with this storm, some of them from those in Massachusetts and Maine with all the snow, and others from the people in New York who prepared for the worst and yet only got about 8 to 10 inches depending on where they were. But that gradient of that snowfall stretched across Long Island.
Definitely. And when it comes to systems like this and snowfall amounts, a lot of it depends on where that low pressure system tracks and where it moves. And that ended up being a big factor with the so-called bust forecast for New York City. They still, as we talked about before, received a good amount of snow, but not quite as much as everyone was expecting. It just all depends on where that low pressure system is going to track and where it's going to move, and that's definitely always a big challenge for meteorologists and other forecasters.
It was definitely a very difficult storm to forecast for, coming from the meteorologists and in New York, as well as for us here talking about where that storm was going to end up and trying to pinpoint how much snow was going to fall in one location or another.
Yeah, it's always definitely a challenge when it comes to snowfalls. We'll talk about a little bit later with a case a little bit closer to home.
Definitely, Rachel. Well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will discuss Groundhog Day in a special segment of Whether or Not.
Stay with us. You're watching the Cold Front here on VUTV.
Hi everybody, I'm Dick Vitale of ESPN, and I'm on VUTV. It's awesome, baby, with a capital A.
Welcome back to the Cold Front. February 2nd is a big day where weather enthusiasts, as well as people from around the world and the country, turn to see if Punxsutawney Phil will see his shadow.
And we tell you if this groundhog is telling the truth in this special segment of Whether or Not. It is said that if the groundhog does not see his shadow on the morning of February 2nd, spring is right around the corner. If the groundhog does see his shadow, it will retreat back into its burrow, and then there will be 6 more weeks of winter. And the saying has many origins, including England, Scotland, and Germany. February 2nd was known as Candlemas Day in Germany, and that is a day which they believe the groundhog would peep out of its winter home. A German poem says, "For as the sun shines on Candlemas Day, so far will the snow swirl until May. For as the snow blows on Candlemas Day, so far will the sun shine before May."
The biggest Groundhog's Day celebration takes place in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, where large crowds have gathered since 1886 to see if Punxsutawney Phil will see his shadow or not. Records have been kept since then as to whether or not the groundhog saw his shadow. Many organizers of this large event say the groundhog's forecasts are correct 75 to 90% of the time, when really climate data has shown that the groundhog is right only about 37% of the time.
And while Groundhog's Day is a way for people to have a little fun in the middle of a long winter season, climate records, as you said before, tell us that winter is not quite over yet.
It's not really over. We still have about a month left of meteorological winter, which lasts from December through the end of February going into March. There is even more time, 6 weeks actually, until the vernal equinox or the first day of calendar spring. I remember always looking to see when I was younger whether or not the groundhog would see a shadow or not. And it's cool to see, but again, there really isn't much truth to it. Only about a third of the time.
Yeah, only about a third time were they correct. And I always remember growing up doing the same thing, seeing if he'd see his shadow, and then thinking, well, March 20th, March 21st, that's usually the first day of spring, and that's usually right about 6 weeks. So at this point, it doesn't really matter.
Right, you have
if the
6 weeks until spring.
You have 6
pretty
weeks
much
regardless.
anyway.
Exactly. And so I guess it's that whole thing of whether or not it begins to feel like spring, or if it's more of a spring-like feel other than winter. So
I guess
it
so.
just makes us all feel good.
Right, and Rachel, there's actually more places across the country, not just in Punxsutawney, Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, where groundhogs look to see their shadow. There's General Beauregard Lee of Atlanta, Georgia, Sir Walter Riley of Raleigh, North Carolina, and Jimmy of Sun Prairie, Wisconsin.
Jimmy, I like that one.
Jimmy the groundhog.
Jimmy the groundhog. That sounds like a cartoon character.
It does.
But I love it.
I do like it. It's simple, not hard to spell,
Right.
like Punxsutawney Phil.
Oh, Punxsutawney Phil, that is such a pain. But you always remember his name. You always remember that it's Punxsutawney Phil from Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
Definitely. Been going since 1886.
That's very true. That's very, very true. So I guess no matter what you call your groundhog or what other rodent sees a shadow to try and tell you when spring will come up, it's still a lot of fun.
Did you know a groundhog is actually a type of gerbil?
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so gerbils, we see hamsters, we see guinea pigs. It's actually from that same, I'm not very good at biology, but that same family, I guess, of animals.
You're not just learning meteorology today on the cold front. You're learning a little bit of animal biology too. You learn something new every day.
For you.
It's pretty great. Bonus. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more winter weather with you. Stay with us. You're watching the Cold Front on VUTV.
On a campus plagued with terrible weather, Valpo students suffer from boredom with no motivation to leave their room. They begin to search for free movies and stumble upon Valpo's new free movie streaming website, where you get unlimited free access to recent movies like Despicable Me 2 and Jobs at the tips of your fingers. So if you're feeling bored, then don't wait. Grab some friends, find a seat, and enjoy a movie on movies.valpo.edu.
Welcome back to the Cold Front. Earlier in the show, we talked about the major blizzard that affected the East Coast back in January. But back home here in Northwest Indiana, we saw a snowstorm of our own.
That's right, Rachel. It was a pretty decent snowstorm. But what's interesting to point out with this storm is that it happened to fall on the 4-year anniversary of the Groundhog's Day blizzard back in 2011. During that blizzard, cars in Chicago were stalled on Lakeshore Drive, and people had to be rescued because of the cold and the snowy conditions.
Yeah, most definitely, Annette. And for this event from this year, a winter storm watch was first issued at 11 a.m. on Friday, January 30th. Meteorologists were calling for a large snow event with several inches of snow likely to fall in a long period of time. And then at 4 a.m. on Saturday, January 31st, a winter storm warning was issued for the entire Chicagoland area ahead of the storm. And then 24 hours later, a blizzard warning was issued with Porter County added into that a few hours later.
Now, at the end of that snowstorm, Chicago reported 19.3 inches of snow at O'Hare Airport from that storm, and 16.2 of those inches fell on February 1st, which set a record for the snowiest day in February in the city of Chicago. This storm was also recorded as the number 5 in the top 5 heaviest snowstorms in Chicago. The highest amounts of snow were reported in the Chicago suburb of Lincolnshire at 22 inches. South of Interstate 80, totals decreased, but the effects were still present across the region.
And as we mentioned, the Chicago area was put under a blizzard warning during this storm, and meteorologists were very concerned with the winds.
That's right. Those winds were expected to increase during the day on Sunday, causing whiteout conditions across much of the Chicagoland. But what does it take to actually get a blizzard? Here's a little story to answer some of your questions.
Northwest Indiana just saw their biggest snowstorm of the season. When all was said and done, the majority of northern Illinois and northwest Indiana saw over 1 foot of snow. Reports of 1.5 feet were common in localized areas, and a train spotter here at the university reported 17.5 inches of snowfall from Saturday night through Monday afternoon. In addition to the major snowfall accumulations, we saw blizzard conditions across the region. However, a blizzard is not defined as a large snow event. According to the National Weather Service, in order for it to be considered a blizzard, a storm must drop visibility down to below 1/4 mile and must have wind speeds greater than 35 miles per hour for 3 consecutive hours. Because so much snow fell in this long-duration storm, cars were snowed in their parking spots and streets were very treacherous to drive. The university canceled all campus operations Sunday afternoon through 12 p.m. on Monday. All morning classes were canceled Monday as well in an effort to clear walkways and streets around campus.
Now, some people really enjoyed this snowfall, and other people are anxiously awaiting the arrival of spring. However, this blizzard is one that I truly will enjoy. Reporting for The Shield, I'm Lynnette Grant.
Well, Lynnette, I know we were talking about the weather blizzard, but that ice cream blizzard looked pretty good too. I think I'd rather have that over what we had over.
I would much rather have that kind of blizzard any other day, especially now that it's February. Once we get into February, we're kind of like, okay, let's have that snow stop for a little bit. It was nice to finally have that snowfall, but that Dairy Queen blizzard was good in its entirety.
I think I would prefer that Dairy Queen blizzard. And speaking of the actual weather blizzard that we saw, Valparaiso on the university campus recorded 17.5 inches of snow. It was definitely a pretty significant event. I know personally, my car got stuck. I couldn't get out, and a lot of my classmates and people who live in the same area that I did as well had very similar issues, and it was a little bit treacherous trying to travel at all on Sunday and even into parts of Monday.
And the university, as I mentioned earlier, the university canceled classes Monday morning, which I think was a very good decision on their part, because even waking up Monday morning to come here and start working on stuff, since I don't live far away, I can walk, it was still very treacherous outside. Things hadn't really been plowed, and so it was still quite dangerous. And we still had a little bit of lake effect left over on Monday also.
Yeah, and then by the time we got into Monday afternoon, then things started to slow down and there wasn't as much snow, which is always a good thing. Gave people a chance to do a little bit more shoveling and clearing out of the roads and everything. The main roads weren't so bad, but it's just that whole kind of digging yourself out, as it were, coming out of this. And wasn't just Valpo that saw a lot of snow. There were a lot of reports coming in from around the area. We had some beautiful pictures come in from our Facebook fans. They sent us a lot of pictures from around the region, anywhere from Illinois to Indiana.
A lot of those pictures were really pretty.
They definitely were. There's my personal favorite. Someone got up on the roof, and instead of taking all the snow off the roof, which you always should do, they made a big snowman out of it.
That is one of my favorite photos,
that's
too.
probably one of my favorite photos. And Lynnette, I have to ask, do you want to build a snowman? I just have to.
I would love to build a snowman with you, Rachel.
There were some, as we saw in your story earlier, some VU students got together, made a giant snowman. And
it was actually the baseball team that put that snowman together.
That's right.
It ended up being about 10 to 12 feet tall, and they ended up standing up. They moved a picnic bench over to and stood on top of it so that they could get the head on the snowman and decorate it. It's fully decorated too, which is so clever and cute.
It was pretty great. So some positive things to come out of this weather event. Whether you like snow or not, you can't really deny that snow makes everything pretty, and we'll save you from any more frozen references, I guess.
I think that's a good idea.
I think it is too. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about more weather phenomena. Stay with us.
Interested in the television industry? Stop by our office in Schnabel Hall and join VUTV today.
Welcome back to the cold front. We are going to briefly talk about something that's been reported across the Midwest this winter, and especially more in a greater instance last winter.
Yeah, definitely because it was so cold. And this phenomenon is called cryoseism, or otherwise known as a frostquake. And these phenomena typically happen when it's extremely cold outside, much like the winter we saw last year.
Definitely, Rachel. These are caused by sudden cracking of soil or rock that's been saturated with water and or ice. When water freezes, it expands and builds stress. And when that stress is eventually released, it creates an explosive-like sound. Have you ever heard of these before?
I have not, but I remember when many classmates of mine last year heard them, and they were not sure what was going on. They were like, wait, what just happened? And that's when it came out that they were these frostquakes. And
they're actually really quite terrifying. I heard it the first time over Christmas break last year when it was extremely cold, and it sounded like something was like either pushing or crashing into my house.
Oh my gosh.
And I was really confused. When you're a kid and you're scared of something, you go to your parents' room and ask them like, what's going on? I actually went to my mom and I'm like, Mom, I heard this. I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
But then I saw on Twitter, a meteorologist that I followed posted something on Twitter and asked his viewers, did anybody hear these loud noises that sounded like explosions overnight? And I replied to him. I said, yes, even though I'm not in the viewing area, I did hear something like that last night. And he told me, go look up frostquake and tell me what you find. And I read it and I'm like, that explains what I heard.
Yeah.
So again, I didn't hear them when we were back on campus, or not so much this year, but I did hear people talking about them last year.
Yeah. And when you have those very frigid temperatures, it just makes sense that this is an event that's going to happen. So next time we are going through an extreme bout of cold and you hear this, don't necessarily be alarmed. It might just be a frostquake.
It probably is just a frostquake.
Yeah,
nothing to be alarmed about.
No,
well,
definitely.
thank you for joining us on this episode of The Cold Front. I'm Lynnette Grant.
And I'm Rachel Duensing. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, VUTV Weather, and to watch past episodes of The Cold Front as well as our daily weather updates. Log on to youtube.com/ValpoVUTV. For Lynnette and myself, have a great day.